sawdust thing. I'm on the street vibrating. You know what we normally park? Like right by the emergency area.
Oh, but I still gotta go to the get the prescription.
I can't hear you. My phone's breaking up.
Why do I have?
different things, issues with it. We want to go change it out because of the split here. Because this is 2 pieces of wood. This was the brush shop one. So the one is in SPD now. You can come down here and place this so they can redo it. So they can redo this one.
And the new one looks better. I couldn't tell you what the difference is, but it just.
I can tell you the difference. Like these seams, man.
Yeah.
Huh?
They just made that out of just one big piece of wood.
No, 2 pieces.
Oh, just
Like 3 pieces, I think. But that's why they got the whole seam issue. And they kind of like just documented it. The last store will come down here and do some tinkering.
Yeah, it cracked pretty bad right after we installed it, within like that first week.
Yeah. But that's a plaque here. Look at it.
Yeah, Pabs, they have the people that made it.
Oh
put
yeah,
their names
on the inside. Yeah, they would do that. Huh?
I don't think the new one has that.
The new one has a
Yeah,
one
it has one right
on the outside. Yes.
Yeah, it has it right here.
Well, yeah, but that one's you saw that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a White House.
Yeah.
Hmm?
I don't think it's
You don't have the whole
I think
thing.
it just said White House.
It's just a, yep, that's what it says.
Oh, wait, this is they were talking about the turnaround.
Oh yeah, I got about it.
So let's move the glass first.
So yeah. If somebody ever breaks this, I'm gonna be so mad. But we have the glass. We have extra glass at $3.99 on a pallet. Did I?
Same glass?
Yes.
All etched and everything?
Yes.
Is that motorized?
No, this is all me pushing it.
So what determines whether or not you top it up?
If she has the graphics or anything like that.
So do you normally set it up like this for a press briefing?
No, only when they want to.
Okay.
They both rotate out.
You haven't seen that either?
No, I had no clue.
Let's see. Very nice stuff right here.
So these are our monitors.
And it still also can go up and down based on the height of the speaker and the podium. Yeah.
That's cool.
Are these our
Yes.
monitors?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he was just saying, the master control controls what's on the monitors here during
Yes.
Oh, I see the seals on the wires. That slides up and down.
Size up and down, got DMX control of that.
So yeah, how do you know? So it's
So we do, yeah, we do by the height. So if she's short, we had to bring it down a lot. Because the last person was way taller than nothing, we couldn't see the White House still, so we kind of brought it down to what we think was a good happy medium. Yeah.
So this is the camera right here.
That's the one, the safe camera we call it.
Yeah.
And then this is the other one.
The cuts camera.
So is the small one also master control? You can watch that too.
Yeah.
So they're both on master control.
They can cut to all 3.
Oh, they can. Okay.
Yeah, and they typically they'll cut to that one when they don't know who's asking questions, and they'll use the touch camera to push in on the primary speaker.
And so master control will be live streaming this.
Yes.
Okay.
We have someone leaving the press for today as well, so it'll be pretty likely.
There's someone leaving?
Do that question that I think Peter Houston said up here. So do that question he asked yesterday. Like, about the
5 or 10 minutes do I spoke with them?
I just dropped my dog off this morning to go get a haircut. I only wanted
Care for some lunch?
Lovely. How was the press conference? Thank you.
It was uninformative.
Yeah.
So you've interviewed on camera, what,
Like
Three or
3 different parents?
yeah.
Or parent adjacent.
Mhm.
Like one neighbor who came to grab the kids. We just got 2, a mom and a grandma, who are trying to get to their kid who's in elementary school because they're on lockdown also.
Okay. I got nothing. I mean, and I could start interviewing parents, but I would actually have to leave there in order to do it.
And there's a 4 p.m. press conference.
That's,
And you're probably going to be on that, right?
is there anybody here besides us from our shop? There's press right here.
I just saw the Teams thing that tagged all of us in Harrison. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm trying to get Tyson. He had to run back and get batteries. You can walk past, yeah.
All right. Well, Holly.
You're okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
I didn't want to mess up y'all's.
No. You're okay.
I appreciate the update.
I'm sorry, I don't have anything more for you.
I'll learn how to do it.
Well, it sounds like there may be more injuries now.
Homeland Security stuff too. I know the FBI did.
I've heard, all we've heard is it's local, state, and federal. Yeah, there's FBI right there. Look at those packets.
They want you.
Yeah. Pardon? Oh, yeah. Hey, we're good. Yeah, Tyson just got back. Give us about 2 seconds and we'll be up.
immediately after this try to convince my editor to not let me go. But then she's gonna say go, and then I'm gonna book travel. Down to carpool.
Okay.
Yeah. Looked at all the Google Maps today. You were right. 3 hours from Minneapolis.
It's
Yeah. It's an early flight too.
that's not the point, and we're gonna have to book it to get back to make it at least like the last flight out.
Okay, well, yeah, well, tell me,
How much do we need to book
so I was
it?
trying to get
Or what?
So I have an 8:15 flight.
Okay.
8:50 p.m.
And he starts speaking at 3,
Yeah,
so like more like 4.
yeah.
Then he'll be done around like 5. And then it's a 3-hour drive.
Correct.
And that's the last flight out.
Well, my flight's 8:15 to Detroit. I don't know if the last flight's back. You could make
This
the
could be my.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pooping the next day. I'm gonna look at the flights right now to DC. Let's see.
Yeah, do that.
See my facial expression
I only got
changed
2 things,
immediately
though.
when you said book it. I was like, oh
Even
wait,
from
we
close
might have an
call
opportunity.
training. One is tramadol,
Okay,
which is a narcotic,
Never heard of it.
and one is
Knock it out with a couple cocktails.
Oh,
yeah,
Advance it.
yeah, exactly.
Couple scotches and off we go.
That's okay.
Well, Dave, I told him once, he goes, oh, you take that.
And you agree to a
How much do you take?
that should be okay.
Yes.
I told him, he
Yeah.
goes,
I think I will
I
join
don't
you.
even give that much to my horse.
Yeah, after PPD.
Okay.
There you go. A lot of people can't take it. Because it makes them I'm about halfway to the
I gotta go to Wisconsin tomorrow. I gotta go
I work to do.
works on it. My nerves are down.
Right.
And I get really, really painful when it's cold.
Yeah.
Makes it almost normal and bearable. So if I get cold and it hurts, just like it would for you, a real cold day, when I got that animal once up, where it didn't used to. I would just get out. I walked through the produce section of a store.
Really?
And my hands would go purple and white, and they would hurt, and they would warm up. I could be in the shower,
And then they
hot water,
Yeah. Frozen.
and it would still stay.
Yeah.
Turn this weird orange color that never get warm. That's the thing to do is get under the covers.
Yeah.
And whenever I kind of get like that, some days it just goes weird shit, you know. Because what is it called? I know that disease. It's the anyway, protect your immune system. Yeah. Whatever. And some days, and I get under the covers, and my wife and son were shopping somewhere.
Yeah.
And you got 2 bonus little gifts. One of them was like, the other one was just gray fleece bag. And that's big. And that's all there. And then I get down. You know, my life is like an ice cream headache. And it just, when it goes away, it feels so good.
There's no way we're gonna make this flight out. There's no way we're going to make this flight out.
You said you're going on vacation?
Which one?
Well, the other
You said
night-
yours is
Yeah,
good
yeah,
for
Saturday morning.
How long?
For a week. So that's Saturday.
It's a 3-hour drive.
House on the beach.
Right there, you're on it.
So I gotta be at there. We gotta leave right now. To be at there for
We haven't been on vacation in about 4 or 5
Well, yours is at so you have 15
Came
minutes
back.
to get to your
I
flight.
was in the city for a week.
With the rental.
Over for a week. Yeah.
Does your family come down to you?
Very loving murder.
He's got a long way.
I know, and the greatest thing is
What they have.
all these things I know.
Able to take them on vacations. For the past. Going way back.
The only flight I could get
Trying to get
is
her legs
8:24 to Baltimore.
My oldest son was 3.
There's
She's
no
like,
way.
stay there 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
My wife used to come
Your what?
on some trips. Yeah, they went to
They used to,
We're gonna leave while he's speaking.
got like 30 recommendations. You could take family members for $50.
But two of them are recommended by 300 people.
And even then, that was $50. So $50 is a lot of wine.
I'm looking at New York, not here.
just to even just to do it. Just to do it. So he said,
Yeah. You spend $50. Yeah. That was a great deal.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Huh?
then you had
At
to
least you give him a heads
Sort
up.
of. Yeah, kind of. You know.
Yeah, you gotta find a new one.
compared to what I used to hear about.
Yeah, well, every word of it is
I
true.
got a bunch of recommendations.
Yeah, the she came out to California with me once, and then we
I have
extended.
lots of names now.
I
even got names that
we extended, and we ended up going. I had done this documentary with Chris Widmer at Sundance, and so I contacted the lady who was what's his name, assistant, and she was too busy, but she sent her.
I began to make my case to my editor. We'll see.
Her assistant and I had lunch and did a little tour.
Nice.
That was kind of obnoxious. I forgot to call ahead, so I called the day before.
Yeah.
She's a real peach, and he wasn't around, so. But that whole place is like a. He built it. But all these sort of ranches.
Yeah.
And he built a house like it was a captain's, sea captain's house, and that's the main office.
Oh, really?
And there's a vineyard which has the sound department
Yeah.
and a couple other places. And then back through the hills, and there's more of a place where it's industrial, where magic is right there. But when we were doing the scouting for this documentary, the producer, the director kept saying, well, we're gonna go in that building at some point, but I'm not sure we wanna shoot it.
Yeah.
So we did all the things to figure out what our stuff was the next day. And she goes, oh, okay, let's go in that building. And you open it up, and there's every car he owns. There's a couple of Tuckers in there.
Oh, man.
There's this, and then there's like seemingly every prop from every movie. Howard the Duck is sitting there.
Yeah.
And you put on Indiana Jones's hat, and the leather jacket, and hold the whip. And then Captain EO, Michael Jackson's thing. And then I went and found, if you remember the second movie when Luke shows up to get what's her name away from Jabba, and he turns on this hand grenade, right, and it lights up and makes noise. I found it on the shelf, and I turned it, and it lit up. It was too funny. I feel like she was messing with us all day, Oh, there's nothing no truth.
Also, isn't so final media entry time? And we land at 8:45.
They stayed in the director and his wife stayed
For the Delta flight.
in one of their they have a bunch of cabins over there.
Yeah.
You land at 8.
So I'm
At
a
8.
lot more.
Yeah.
And they said
I
what
called
you
her
do is
again
like
for
you
that. There's like no way. She's like,
put it in
I,
the sink.
I emailed her. Oh, she said there's no
no,
way.
you can
back
get.
and
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I emailed her too, and she seems
they have like these
like
servants
flexible.
hiding in the walls.
Yeah.
Same thing. Said it was a little creepy.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Supposed to go.
Yeah,
This was
so
supposed to
now.
go a while ago.
I like the story together about the school shooting, I'm sure.
Yeah.
was actually really looking forward to that part. Think about the comedy, both of us definitely gonna miss our flight, speeding back across state lines. Is this the news from yesterday? I thought Jeff threw you guys and Andy at least. I think we had that yesterday. Andy has it. Did they change?
Nope.
So, no way, right? Like, so, you know how politics in the White
Yeah.
House works. Okay. So, always lines are full here
Yeah.
anyways. Like, I'm just gonna miss this. 80 million. I've almost done it.
So who's in New Hampshire?
Katie or Pete, have you ever talked to her?
Hey.
Yeah, which is like a great gig too, right? But
So who has White House too?
Nikki, Peter Scheer.
So they're good at both.
And singing. Oh, and you got shows. That's her.
Well, students, I can't.
Weird because like
I mentioned that there were some people back here, so you're
we
never
don't, we
gonna
don't
ask.
have to go. That's why Peter and I were still in town. So you'll be
It felt like maybe like 5 more minutes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It seemed to me too, but like it's not like it's incredible stuff. But I think we're doing still a lot. But in terms of like doing weeks and stuff, that totally diminished. But it is good you guys still there to go.
Oh yeah, that's my vote. Yeah. Coming back.
Yeah, yeah, I don't, this should be kind of like full, although don't impress me, I just gotta get this. When was the last time? I would read like most staff's actual stories. In Washington DC. Did he leave? What did he do?
I got out of that.
You found out after she, you returned to find another companion?
Well, she would be an employee.
Oh,
I
sure.
think you have all the travel, traveling.
That traveling, yeah.
And
Oh,
TK.
No, the journal?
You mean I couldn't talk about that. What? Oh, when she's doing the whole. No, we are. We're doing festival. I'm like, we're doing. I don't know if they offer the radio service. I didn't see. Yeah.
What's the latest with the heritage? So is it still one radio, two print, all that?
It's two print. I thought it was one print.
That's what I was asking. I don't know.
It's the wire. Do all 3 wires. Yeah.
What, two print? Waka and print? Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't think they have a walk up.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty big.
Downstairs and thinks she's doing great.
I mean, she had to use more, like, her two hours.
I'm surprised with her.
But she's not like doing that marks or anything like that.
Nothing.
You mean when this
The
Congress
30
comes
minutes
out?
of people.
Next
So,
week? Yeah. I don't know, there's stuff on Tuesday. There's hearings on Tuesday. Andrew Cuomo is going to be testifying from New York, the governor. He's supposed to testify at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, yesterday, in the House hearing. That's what, at least that's what I read yesterday. Doesn't change. Yeah. I think 2 o'clock, I think, is the
I haven't been
governor.
here. Besides, I feel like it's a while.
This is Tuesday.
The last time I was there, it was a big traffic.
No, I got a, somebody offered me a credential, but
Oh, I was in
really
Vegas.
a bit.
I just
Say,
When he like
That
got COVID and
18 hours.
yeah.
Yes, wait, is
Yeah.
that Steam?
Very long days.
Week. Yeah.
Oh my god, I was cool. I saw you there, but you weren't even long.
Very cramped.
That was the same trip as the USA basketball.
No, that was VP. That was week before. So I didn't eat. I started eating like down to Vegas to pool by.
Oh, you were looking forward to that day. I
Yes,
remember.
yes.
I
It
remember.
was too little to make it.
So we went there.
I like food and it was more fun, but it's like a lot of it's not fun. It's not fun. I want to do it.
You did? That's
I knew it.
right on the money.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree. I'm the same way.
No, I did. You knew ahead of time because it was still in the one place. And then when they offered me, I thought you were going back here.
Reach out to that guy.
See, next thing I guess myself is not sitting down.
Am I?
No, I think we're good. I think we're good.
I fell today.
Good afternoon, everybody. So this week, kids across the country are heading back to school for the new school year. Today is supposed to be an exciting day for students and parents, but instead, we're seeing yet another horrific shooting. Now, as a parent myself, I know the anxiety that comes with sending your kid out into the world every day, living with the real fear of the worst can happen. So please know that our hearts are with those families in Winder, Georgia, who are forced to face this act of senseless violence. I want to let you know that the President and the Vice President have both been briefed, and his administration will continue coordinating with federal, state, and local officials as we receive more information. We're grateful for the brave first responders who are on the scene, and we stand ready to provide support as needed. As the President has said time and time again, this is not normal. This is not normal. Students and teachers deserve to know that their schools are safe. They should focus on learning, not lockdowns. While the President and Vice President have taken historic action to reduce gun violence, more must be done to keep our schools and communities safe. We continue to call on Congress to do something, We need universal background checks. We need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, require safe storage of firearms, invest in violence prevention programs, and pass a national red flag law. Enough is enough, and I cannot say this enough, which is enough is enough. We cannot allow this to happen in our communities. We cannot allow this to happen in our schools. So we have to do everything that we can to keep our children safe, to keep the people who are supposed to protect our children, who are they supposed to learn from, safe. And enough is enough. Congress needs to act. Now, turning to my colleague from NSC, who's here to discuss the latest Biden-Harris administration actions today against foreign actors attempting to covertly influence our elections and undermine confidence in our democratic institution. Admiral John Kirby will discuss the coordinated actions we are taking in addition to other foreign policy news of the day. Admiral?
Thank you, Corinne. Good afternoon, everybody. I think as you saw today, the Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, and the State Department took a series of coordinated actions against foreign actors associated with the Russian government who are attempting to covertly influence our elections. Specifically, all these federal agencies revealed activities directed and funded by RT, formerly known as Russia Today, to covertly spread Russian government propaganda with the aim of reducing international support for Ukraine, bolstering pro-Russian policies and interests, and influencing voters here in the U.S. And in foreign elections as well. RT is no longer just a propaganda arm of the Kremlin. It is being used to advance covert Russian influence actions. Additionally, the Russian government is laundering influence and information operations through Kremlin-controlled commercial firms, such as the Social Design Agency, that work extensively at the direction and control of the Russian Federation. All of this activity was designed to funnel disinformation through outlets and social media influencers that a certain number of Americans find credible. We will not stand for that. So in addition to the law enforcement actions that were announced just a little bit ago by the Attorney General, the State Department announced a new policy to restrict visas for employees of Kremlin-supported media organizations that are affiliated with these covert activities. And they released a $10 million reward for justice for individuals associated with a Russian hacking group that's named Russian Angry Hackers Did It, or RA-DIT for short, as it's also known. The State Department also designated 6 RT-affiliated entities as foreign missions, a designation that now requires them to report information about their personnel and their property to the United States government.
For their part, the Treasury Department is sanctioning 6 executives and officials affiliated with RT, 3 executives associated with other Kremlin-controlled organizations. And additionally, the Treasury Department is designating ANO Dialogue, a Russian government-founded nonprofit that uses artificial intelligence to create and distribute online Russian disinformation for use against election campaigns. The Treasury included ANO Dialogue's subsidiary and its executive officer in its sanctions as well. Now, Russia, of course, is not alone in its desire to destabilize our democracy. As you may recall, just last month, the United States government disclosed that Iran engaged in a series of cyber actions with the intent to gain access to the private communications of former President Trump and his campaign by way of associated political advisors. Those efforts were clearly intended to denigrate former President Trump and to compromise his political campaign. We made it clear then, and we make it clear again today, that this is unacceptable, and we won't stand for it either. Let me close with just 2 more thoughts, if I could. First, and most importantly, we are committed to protecting our democracy and our elections, regardless of the source or the target trying to interfere. As today's actions make clear, we have the ability to monitor these threats, to thwart them, to identify the actors involved, and to hold the actors involved accountable. We will continue to do so. These actions are the result of months of hard investigative and interagency cooperation, and we're grateful for the law enforcement, diplomatic, intelligence, and Treasury professionals who brought it all together. They put the interest of the American people first, right where it belongs. That brings me to my second point. The hard work now must continue. No resting, no waiting, no backing off. The American people can rest assured that the men and women of the federal government are at this very moment laboring to prevent future abuses and interference in our electoral process. But this cannot alone be the work of government. Every citizen bears a hand. We urge all Americans to read through the indictment today. Study the sanctions and the designations that we announced. All of it's online. All of it is readily available to you. Likewise, please take time to consider how you get your news and information. It can be difficult, of course, to be absolutely certain of its authenticity, especially given the covert tactics of groups like RT. But with time, some patience, and a firm reliance on credible and established media outlets, that uncertainty can be greatly reduced. As President Biden has said, democracy can at times be fragile, but it is also inherently resilient. We all need to work together as Americans to ensure that resilience. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. First on this disinformation campaign, can you talk a little bit more about why unveiling this now? And secondly, do you see this as just the tip of the sword? Is there more out there? And the why now question is basically, I think, in some ways, a lot of Americans would say about Russian disinformation, not surprising. And may, in some ways, question why is the administration doing this so close to the election? And I may be answering my own question a little bit here, but if you could just talk to the timing. And then secondly, has there been any more meetings with senior officials and Israelis today regarding the ceasefire or the situation on the Israel-Lebanon border?
Okay, there's a lot there. On the why now, and I think the Attorney General talked about this. I mean, the actions that they announced today, and of course it was coordinated with the announcements by State and Treasury, all really reflected where they were in the investigative process. And as the Attorney General said, Amr, it's still an ongoing investigation, so I wouldn't rule out anything in terms of any future actions that might be taken. Depends on where this investigation takes us. So the why now was really driven by the progress of the investigation, the certainty they had in what they had uncovered, and the ability that they believe they had to take the actions in a way that were commensurate with the goals of the investigation. So it was all really timed to the investigation, that's all. And you asked for tip of the spear. But let me go back to, you also said people are maybe shrugging about this because, well, it's just, but that's, I mean, obviously people can have their own views about whether they're surprised or not that Russia might be trying to interfere in our election, but we're not taking it lightly. Nobody's shrugging here because it's that important. It's that important to convey to the American people that we are taking the safety and security of our electoral process seriously. So nobody's shrugging about it, and we're going to constantly monitor, as I said, these threats, be able to thwart them when we see them, and identify and hold the actors accountable. On your second question about the ceasefire talks, I have no additional specific meetings to talk about today, except that even today, we are in touch with our counterparts in Qatar, in Israel, and certainly in Egypt about trying to see if we can get a proposal that can be finally culminated and a ceasefire deal can be achieved. So those conversations are active even today.
There was a report that Jake Hochstein and Brett McGurk had a virtual meeting today with Dermer and I think some other Israeli officials. Is that not true?
I won't confirm any specific individual sessions except to tell you that even today there have been ongoing conversations with our counterparts, as you would expect that it would be. So even though there's not Teams meeting in Doha or Cairo right now, it's not like the effort has lapsed.
Thanks, Kareem. Thanks, Admiral. On the Russian interference, is there any indication of at what level this has been apparently approved in Russia? Does this go? I mean, does this go up to Putin's level, for example? And secondly, is there any sign of the this disinformation favouring one or other of the candidates in the U.S. election?
We believe Mr. Putin is winning of these actions. As for your second question, I think, look, in Iran's case, it was very clear, as I mentioned in my opening statement, and I think the Attorney General did too, very clear that they were trying to denigrate former President Trump and involve themselves in his campaign to their detriment. I would say, though, what we talked about in Russia, they are certainly trying to sow discord, feed disinformation, and try to put narratives out there through voices that the American people might find credible that support their policies, that support their interests, such as trying to diminish support in Ukraine. So it's very consistent with what we've seen Mr. Putin do in the past.
Thanks, Kareem. Thanks, Admiral. So as you alluded to, we've been here before, and after 2020, the administration imposed sweeping sanctions and also took efforts to prevent this sort of behavior. So why are we here again? And what about today's actions will deter future disinformation?
We're here again because actors like Iran and Russia are at it again and continue to believe that it somehow suits their interest to interfere in our electoral process. So we're here because of what they've been doing, and that we're trying to hold them accountable and to make it harder for them to do this. And that's exactly what the actions today, and I'm sure actions to come as appropriate, will do. Will make it harder for them. Will it make it completely impossible? Probably not, because they'll find workarounds. I mean, these are actors, in this case driven by the Kremlin itself, that are bound and determined to try to change and influence the way Americans vote when they go in that ballot box. And that's why I said it at the end of my opening statement. Everybody, not just the federal government, but everybody needs to be concerned about this. And everybody needs to bear a hand in pushing back on the influence attempts by Russia.
And then on Israel, we asked Kareem, not me, I wasn't here yesterday, but my colleagues asked Kareem in many different ways about the president's recent comments with regard to Netanyahu not doing enough to secure a ceasefire deal. So my question is whether he has directly expressed that himself to Netanyahu, that he is not doing enough.
I would say that the conversations with the Prime Minister every time they occur are very direct and very forthright. These are two guys that know each other well, and the President, he makes his concerns very plainly known. But for all the things that those two gents may not agree on politically, and maybe not even completely agree on in the conduct of the war, they do agree on the central tenet that Israel needs to be defended, that the Israeli people shouldn't have to live next door to that kind of a threat, and that the United States, and President Biden specifically, is going to continue to stand with Israel as they defend themselves against this threat, and to do everything that we can to try to bring this conflict to a close.
And then one quick one, just for clarification, because a lot continues to happen on this front. When the president is calling for a ceasefire, does he mean a permanent ceasefire at this point, or does he mean one long enough to allow the hostages to be released?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, the ceasefire that we're really trying to drive out right now is getting to phase one, which gets you 6 weeks of no fighting. 6 weeks of no fighting, and that means more humanitarian assistance, and then getting at least the first tranche of hostages out, the ones that are at the most risk, elderly, sick, women in particular. But if you can get through phase one, because once you get into phase one, and that's the goal, just let us get to phase one right now, then you can start building towards phase two. And if you can get to phase two, you can get both sides to phase two, well, then you're talking about a real potential end to the hostilities in general, which of course would be a general ceasefire. So what we're focused on right now is phase one. That's a 6-week ceasefire. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, appreciate it. Taking a step back, just to follow up there, has the message from this administration been to families of Americans held hostage still that the only hope for their loved ones is getting to phase one of that ceasefire deal?
Our message to the families, and we conveyed this recently, Mr. Sullivan did, is that we're going to keep doing everything we can to get their loved ones home where they belong. Everything we can. Right now, we continue to believe that the best option, the best possible way to do that is through this deal that's been on the table now for how many months. And as I've said before, I'll say so again today, we still believe these gaps can be narrowed. We still believe it's an achievable outcome. Whether we'll get there or not, I don't know. But we still believe that that we're close enough that we got to keep our shoulders to the wheel.
I guess my question is, it might be the best option, but is it the only option?
I think it would be imprudent for me to either negotiate the details of this deal in public or to speculate about any other kinds of opportunities might occur if it falls apart. I just don't think it would be useful for me to do that. What I can assure you, and we have assured the families, is that President Biden and this entire national security team is 100% dedicated to getting their loved ones home. Right now, the locus of that energy, the full focus of this administration is trying to get this ceasefire deal in place.
Switching gears to Ukraine, obviously a big shakeup in the government there. Is that the kind of thing that the U.S. is giving advice on or weighing in? When you hear, obviously you're in close contact with everyone in Zelensky's government, are they seeking your advice on how to make changes to their government?
No, and we're not offering advice on how to administer their democracy. That's up to President Zelensky. It's up to the Ukrainian people. These decisions are President Zelensky's decisions to make with respect to who's supporting him in his cabinet. It's not going to change the way we interact with Ukraine. It's certainly not going to change the support that we're going to continue to provide them.
Great. John, on a different topic, has the president spoken to his counterpart in Japan about plans to block the merger of the U.S. Steel deal? And are you concerned that it will impact relations between the two countries?
No, there's no conversations to speak to, Jeff. President has been very consistent on this. He believes that American steel companies ought to be American-owned. There's a CFIUS process that needs to occur. This is the kind of potential transaction that we believe is suitable for a CFIUS review, and I really can't go beyond that.
Just on a different topic then, back to Israel. Do you have a timeline for when this latest peace proposal is going to be made?
Ultimately, we'd like to have it now. There's a real sense of urgency here to try to get this done. And as I said earlier to Amr, even today, we've been having very active conversations with our counterparts in the region to try to get it across the finish line. We want to get it done now. It needs to be closed.
That's great. John, you're obviously willing to acknowledge that Iran's intent in attempting to interfere in the election is to, as you put it, denigrate a former president. You don't seem willing to acknowledge that Russia's intent is to denigrate the vice president. Why is that?
I'm just telling you what we've learned through the investigation and what we've seen, and reiterating what the Attorney General laid out this afternoon in terms of what RT has become and what this social design agency was trying to do in cyberspace in terms of sowing disinformation and discord. It's not for some sort of queasiness about talking about their intentions. I'm just laying out what we've seen and what the law enforcement actions were taken today and why they were taken today. But obviously, when we have something declarative that we can speak to, we'll speak to that.
And then just on another matter, there's a report that a U.S. service member was detained in Venezuela. Do you have a comment on that?
I can confirm that a U.S. service member was in fact detained in Venezuela. My understanding is that this individual was on some sort of personal travel and not official government business. I think the Pentagon has spoken to this or plans to provide a little bit more context on it. I really can't go beyond that. We're obviously, just the last thing I'd say is we're obviously in touch as appropriate as you think we would be with Venezuelan authorities to try to get more knowledge and information about this.
Does the president feel particular pressure about typically when Americans are detained somewhere overseas, he can sort of act unilaterally with partners and so forth, but can do that? This has been much more complex because of Israel's desire to lead anything. Does he have a separate track for unilateral actions that he could take, and does he have a timeline for that?
Nothing's more important to the president than safety and security of Americans overseas, particularly those that are being held hostage or detained. And of course, the president wants to take the widest view possible of options available to him to secure the release of people that are held hostage or detained. And you've seen that we have not been loath to get creative in trying to figure out ways to do that. Of course, we think through many different options and alternatives. It would be irresponsible if we didn't, Kelly. But, as I said earlier, we still believe, and part of that is because we know we have gotten this done before with a previous hostage swap. We still believe that this is the best way to move forward. But we'll see where it goes, and obviously I'm certainly not in a position, nor would I ever, try to close down decision space for the president in terms of options that might be available to him.
Oh, thanks so much. Just to put a finer point on Jeff's question from earlier on about the steel deal, can you say there has been reporting out there saying the president is prepared to nix that deal? Can you confirm that reporting?
I cannot.
And one other sort of just a quick question about, I didn't quite hear what you said about Putin's personal involvement.
He was witting of this. He was witting of RT's activities.
Okay.
John, do you see a possible link between Russian attempts to undermine the support for Ukraine as a part of this operation and a 6 months delay in approving supplemental in Congress that we had earlier this year? And if we can stay on Ukraine, today Russia hit Lviv with ballistic missiles. It's a western city. 7 people were killed, also a 7-year-old girl. Yesterday was Poltava. It's a central eastern Ukrainian city. How does it make sense that Russia keeps on killing Ukrainians while Ukraine, and killing Ukrainians even far away from the front lines, while Ukraine is not allowed to use provided weapons to hit military targets inside Russia, where these attacks are coming from?
Yeah, on your first question, I cannot point to connective tissue between RT's covert influence activities and the delay of the supplemental. You know, you should talk to members of Congress, the Republican side in particular, who held that up. And they can talk to their reasons for why they did that. And for that 6 months, you want to talk about what's going on in Ukraine today? For that 6 months, Russia made gains. Russia gained ground. They took territory. They killed more Ukrainians. And they really put the Ukrainian forces up against it because they didn't have the weapons to fight back. That was a tough 6 months, and it did set back the campaign in Ukraine. As for what's going on now, we condemned it yesterday, and we condemn it today, what Mr. Putin's doing. Hitting civilian infrastructure, trying, especially in advance of winter coming, knocking out energy grids. It's despicable. Unfortunately, it's a play right out of his playbook. It's not something new that he hadn't done before. Nothing's changed about our view that Ukraine should be able to use the tools it has available to it to defend itself. And that's why air defense continues to be a prominent issue in these security packages that we're giving, so that they can help defend against these attacks on their energy infrastructure. But
inside Russia, where these attacks
I was getting there. I was getting all warmed up. I was getting there. I'm telling you, nothing's changed about our policy with respect to long-range strikes inside Russia and for Russian territory. I also think it's important to note, if I might, that 90% of the aircraft that Russia uses for glide bombs and long-range strikes, we've done the math on this, 90% of them lie outside 300 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, deep inside Russia. So the argument that somehow if you just give them and they attack them, and tell them it's okay, that they're going to be able to go in and hit the majority of the Russian aircraft and air bases that are in fact used to strike them is not true. It's a misconception.
So we don't foresee the change in policy ever?
I don't have any policy changes to speak to today.
Thank you. First on elections, you know this is an election year. Elections are being held across the world in dozens of countries. During your investigations, did you come across that Russia and Iran, the two countries that you named, are try to interfere in the elections for other countries as well?
We believe that they are using these same tools, particularly through RT and covert influence, to affect foreign elections, yes.
Early this year in May, one of the senior Russian officials had said that U.S. is trying to interfere elections in India. Are you aware about that? What is the response to it?
It's not true. It's a ridiculous claim.
Next question about President's telephonic call with the Indian Prime Minister Modi after his trip to Russia and Ukraine. Do you think India can play a role in bringing peace and ending the war in Ukraine, and in what way it can do it?
Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, I've talked about this before. Any nation that is willing to try to help end this war and do so in keeping with President Zelensky's prerogatives, the Ukrainian people's prerogatives, his plan for a just peace, we would certainly welcome a role like that.
And was there any
I
talk?
thought you said you only had one more.
Just follow up with that. Did the two leaders also discuss the situation in Bangladesh?
Yes.
And what was that?
Well, I think they shared the concerns, and the president made clear his continued concerns about safety and security of the people in Bangladesh and the future of their democratic institutions.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, John. Getting back to the Middle East, the President on February the 26th said, "My hope is by next Monday we will have a ceasefire." On Saturday evening, just past, he said, "We are on the verge of having an agreement." And it was on Monday morning when he was asked whether Prime Minister Netanyahu was doing enough to reach a deal, he replied no. Why did it take him more than 6 months to reach that conclusion?
Conclusion? What conclusion?
That Prime Minister Netanyahu isn't doing enough to get a ceasefire.
The president wants this ceasefire. The president knows that in order to get this ceasefire, it requires leadership. It requires compromise. And it requires a common understanding of exactly how this ceasefire is going to benefit the people of Israel and the people of Gaza. And there are substantial things in here for the people of Gaza. But if you're asking me to apologize or issue some sort of regret because we want to get caught trying, because we want to see it over the finish line, because there are times when we've been optimistic that we can get there, only to learn that we couldn't, I ain't gonna do it. There is nothing wrong with continuing to try to achieve this incredibly difficult negotiation and in this outcome, a ceasefire that again would visit terrific benefits all around, including in the region. And so have there been times when we've been stymied? Yes. Have there been times when we thought we were close and turned out that we weren't as close as we thought? Absolutely. And you know what? Today might be one of those days. Even today, I told the gaps are, we can narrow them. And today might be one of those days that maybe I'll prove to be wrong. But no apologies for trying. No apologies for keeping the shoulder to the wheel.
Well, the issue isn't apologies for trying. The issue is, does the administration have a realistic view of Prime Minister Netanyahu's willingness to make peace?
I think we know Prime Minister Netanyahu pretty well. Nobody better than Joe Biden.
Sincere with
I've
one
answered the
pace.
question.
Thanks. Earlier this month, Vietnam's president traveled to China and met with their president. We're hearing that Vietnam's president could meet with Biden on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly later this month. Can you confirm this meeting or just comment on the significance of such a meeting given the state of...
Which meeting? The meeting between President Xi and the President of Vietnam, or a potential one between President Biden?
A potential one between the U.S. and Vietnam.
I don't have a schedule for the UN General Assembly to speak to today. As you know, when the President goes up to New York for the General Assembly, not only does he deliver remarks, but he does conduct a series of bilateral discussions. We'll have a much more robust agenda to speak to as we get a little closer to that. But look, on Vietnam, I mean, as you saw, the President upgraded our relationship with Vietnam to a full strategic partnership. That's a big deal. And we know that Vietnam values the relationship with the United States. But they're also a neighbor of China. They live in the neighborhood. And of course, every nation's leader there has to determine for themselves what that bilateral relationship with China is going to look like. We respect that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. First, thank you. First on Russia, this is the type of activity that's been going on for the better part of a decade, and this.
You mean the election interference?
Yeah, and the usage of particularly social media profiles to report false accounts and false narratives. And I'm wondering what role you think the companies and the platforms play in allowing these accounts to proliferate.
These are private companies, and certainly they have to make their own decisions. It's not about, we obviously are respectful of freedom of speech, and certainly respectful of the private decisions that these companies' leaders have to make. But we do think it's important, and today's actions and the way the Attorney General laid it out is important to expose it, to disclose it. And it's why, in my opening statement, I also urge the American people to be mindful of what's out there, because these fake social media personas and disinformation in cyberspace is incredibly difficult to shut down. So yes, we believe tech companies need to be aware of these activities. We believe, and they have taken action in the past to shut down accounts that have violated their own policies and procedures. We encourage that as well. But it also is the consumers too. The reader, the viewer, they have responsibilities as well to make sure that they're getting the best possible, most accurate information. And you're not always going to get it just in an online format.
And on the Middle East, the Justice Department also unsealed charges against Hamas leaders for the actions of October 7th. The charges were dated back in February, but one of the Hamas leaders that was named is currently located in Doha. And I'm wondering if the U.S. is pressing Qatar to have that leader extradited or arrested.
I don't have any law enforcement activity to speak to about that today.
Is there any impact that you think unsealing these charges from February will have on the negotiations where they stand right now? Why unseal them today?
Well, again, I refer you to the Justice Department for the decision to why unseal them. As you rightly said, that the indictments actually date way back. So that I let the Justice Department speak to the decision about unsealing it. As for an effect on the discussions, it was important to unseal those. It was important to make that known that we were holding these Hamas leaders accountable. At the same time, we continue, as I said to Amr, having active discussions about the ceasefire deal. We still believe we can get there.
What about Al Jazeera in the back? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Very quickly, John.
Sorry, man.
I appreciate it. What pressure is the United States putting on Hamas and Netanyahu to close this deal?
I'm sorry, say it again. What pressure we're putting on?
What pressure is the United States putting on Hamas and Netanyahu to close this deal?
It's not just about twisting arms and putting pressure. It is about having active, what we hope to be constructive conversations about negotiating the final details. And that's really where we are. And in any negotiation, when you get down to the brass tacks, that's when the horse trading really begins, and that's where it gets difficult, and that's where we are right now. It's really about trying to get both sides to yes here. And again, I can't negotiate the details in public with you. But I heard a question asked yesterday in here about why we're only pressuring one side and not the other. And I tell you what, it was a question about how only the Prime Minister is feeling the heat. And I'll tell you, if you're Mr. Sinwar, he's buried in a tunnel somewhere. He ain't coming up for air too much. His forces have been decimated. His resources have dried up. The people he claimed to be protecting and defending are living in deplorable conditions because of the war that he started on the 7th of October. So I don't buy this notion that there's no pressure being put on Hamas or Hamas leadership. And the indictments that were unsealed yesterday, I think, prove that as well. So,
thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. I do have... Sorry, guys. Have your patience for a second. All right, I do have one more thing before we get going here. So lastly, today is a day of mixed emotions for us in the press office as we say goodbye to Christine Thompson, who's off to the Capitol Hill. The amount of times I said hello and goodbye to people, it's, but this one is very much one of those that goes in the box of we very much do have mixed emotions. In a true diva fashion, she's leaving on Beyonce's birthday. Because if anyone makes an exit with flair, that is Christine, a proud member of the Beehive. Christine has worn several different hats in the White House, not just here in the White House press office with us. She joined the White House as a summer intern. So if you have ever been an intern here or want to be an intern here, there are many opportunities. So went on to serve the First Lady's office, comms office, and then moved over to the press team as one of our wranglers, as you all know. She's from Alabama, and she is Alabama all the way down with Southern charm, Peter. I'm sure you'd appreciate that. Quick wit and a hint of shade. We'll miss her dearly, but we know she'll keep moving on up. And here's to watching her shine on the Hill. We are so proud of you and excited for you. And if you have a moment later today, please come to the back, lower press, and give your goodbyes and well wishes to Christine. All right. And with that, we end the briefing. I'm just kidding. I do want to say, as I was walking out, we did hit send on a statement from the president on the shooting in Georgia. So hopefully you all have that in your inbox, the awful high school shooting. We will continue to work with local officials, and we stand ready to work with law enforcement on the ground. It is a horrific, horrific day, a sad day when kids go to school and have to deal with that type of violence. And that is something that is in the president's statement. He talks about how it's personal to him. Obviously, he and the First Lady, certainly Dr. Biden, are mourning the deaths of those whose lives were cut too short. These are high school kids. And so we certainly will be thinking of them, but we want to continue to do the work on gun violence, obviously not just in Georgia, but across the country. And the president, this is a president, an administration, the Biden-Harris administration, who has put that at the forefront and want to continue to see that done. And as I said at the end of my topper earlier, is that enough is enough, and congressional members need to act. They need to act. Get Homer.
First, thanks for the reminder about Beyonce's birthday.
Oh,
we'll have
that's what we're here for, clearly.
But on a more serious note,
Yeah.
you've said, and you just said it again, about the need to do work. The president has limited time in office. Does he think, or is he planning to take another shot at gun control with what time he has left?
And I'm glad you said you said another shot, because we were able, this president, and as you talk about, the final couple of months of his administration, let's not forget the 3.5 years, and what the president was able to do is pass a bipartisan piece of legislation to deal with gun violence, and something that we hadn't seen in decades, in 30 years. And this president, this vice president, was able to make that work and make that come to fruition. Obviously, we need more. We need more work to be done. It cannot stop at that bipartisan legislation. We have to continue. We got to continue to find ways and their actions. I talked about them. Banning assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, making sure that we have universal background checks. These are easy things to do. We believe congressional Democrats are ready to move. We can't do it by ourselves. Congress can't do it by themselves. They need Republicans to step in and also do this like they did before, not too long ago, to get this done. So this is personal to the president, he says in his statement. This is personal to the vice president. This is personal to Dr. Biden. This is something that they want to see get done, and we are going to do that. We have the first ever office to prevent gun violence. That is something that the president created. Obviously, the vice president leads that office, and we are going to continue to find ways to protect our kids, to protect communities. And so, yes, this is an important continued part of the president's initiative for the next couple of months to do just that. And it is Congress. We have laid out what it is that we believe needs to get done. They need to act.
Do you have any? Can you lay out any plans for the president? It's going to be his final September 11th in office, and that's always been a big deal. Whoever the office holder is, how is he going to spend September 11th this year?
I believe we put out a statement saying or confirmed that the president and the vice president are going to be in New York on 9/11, and so we'll have more to share, obviously, as we get closer to that. But look, I have traveled with the president on his trips as it relates to that horrific day, and he is someone who certainly never forgets and always honors those that we lost, and will continue to do so. And next week he'll do that alongside the vice president.
Will he visit the other two major
I don't have anything more to share beyond that, but you will see the president and the vice president next week together as they mourn the thousands of lives that were lost on that day, and also the first respondents who obviously put their lives on the line to protect Americans on that day.
Just one last small one from his and his family's vacation last month to Santa Ynez. Has he reimbursed Joe Kiani for the ranch, and can you tell us how much?
Yeah, so what I can say, look, I'm not going to get into cost here. First of all, the president is the president wherever he goes. He certainly was busy during that time that he spent with his family. And so the president does what he's done every year since he's been president, has taken that time with his family around the summer months or even around the holidays, which is in line with other presidents. So there is the same actions, the same thing that other presidents have done when it comes to these types of vacations. I can say that this president has done. It is in line with the ethics that is tied into all of this. I don't have numbers here. It's not something that I can provide.
Did he pay something?
I just don't have anything beyond that to say, but to say that he has taken he's taken every action or done the same process that every other president has done when they have taken time with their family. There's nothing new. It is in line with what is required by him to take. I don't have numbers here to share with you. Okay, Peter.
Thank you. President Biden's approval rating is soaring. It's up 13% all the way to 48%. Does it bother the president that people are so pleased that he is retiring?
Am I hearing a little twang in your voice, Peter? A little something in your...
I know better. No, but you guys keep telling us to appreciate him on the way out about the Inflation Reduction Act and things like that.
I'm glad that you listen to me when I'm up here. Look, here's what I can say. I think what the American people appreciate is indeed what we have been able to do in the past several years. When you think about inflation is falling with income while incomes are climbing, right? You think about Medicare is finally being able to negotiate lower drug costs. This president, this administration has been able to beat Big Pharma. That's a big deal. Other presidents have tried to do it. Other elected officials have tried to do it. They can't get it done. Manufacturing is indeed coming back here to America. Our infrastructure is being rebuilt. Violent crimes is at a low, 50-year low. Matter of fact, the last president in his last year, murder rates were skyrocketing. And so the president has been able to work on that. And this is a president and a vice president that has done the work to make Americans' lives better, to make their lives better, to change their lives in a transformational way that is going to matter. And I think that's what the American people want to see, and that's what this president has been able to do.
A different topic. Vice President Harris once said years ago that she wanted to decriminalize illegal border crossing. Now she's saying that her values haven't changed. And so how much ownership does she have for this latest NYPD stat that 75% of arrests in Midtown Manhattan lately have been migrants?
My goodness, there was a lot in that question. I mean, look, just going back to the values, and obviously the vice president can speak for herself, and her campaign will speak for herself, for her. Her values haven't changed, and you heard that on the interview that she did with CNN very recently, and I think that's important. I think someone's values matter, and that's what you see from the vice president, and certainly that's what you see from this president. Look, as you're talking about the New York, I believe it's the New York Post report, as you just stated, look, you heard directly from the New York Police Department. They put out a statement which was reflected in that story. So just want to, in your story, so we want to be really clear. So I would refer you to the spokespeople who spoke to this. And I would say more broadly, we fundamentally believe this administration, including Harris, because this is the Biden-Harris administration, believe that anyone found guilty of crimes should be held accountable. That is something that we fundamentally believe. And you have heard us say that we welcome local law enforcement support and cooperation in apprehending and removing individuals who pose that risk, who pose a national security risk. And so that's what we welcome. I would refer you to the New York Police Department. They actually spoke to this and kind of spoke to that number that was being used, and I would refer you to them.
And so my last question then would be, if the vice president's values have not changed, why have so many of her positions on policies changed?
I would say look at what the vice president has done with this president the last 3.5 years. Look what we have been able to do. Look what we've been able to do at the border without much help from Republicans, because they're too busy listening to the former president, sadly, and telling them not to actually do the things that majority of Americans want to see them doing, and that being dealing with the challenges at the border. They listen to Donald Trump instead of continuing to work with us in a bipartisan way. That's what they chose to do. That's on them. But because of the actions that this administration has taken, we have seen those actions lead to numbers going down at the border, and that matters. And that's because of the work that we have done. And and you heard me talk about the economy, what the president and this vice president have been able to do. We cannot forget what the Biden-Harris administration inherited when they walked into this administration. A once-in-a-century pandemic. People were dying. Thousands of people were dying a day. And the last administration, the Trump administration, didn't bother to leave a comprehensive plan on dealing with the pandemic. They didn't bother. They were too busy. He was too busy telling people to inject bleach into their bodies. That's what he was doing. Meanwhile, this president and this vice president passed the American Rescue Plan. Only Democrats voted for that. And because of that, we were able to open up schools. Because of that, we're able to open up businesses. Because of that, we're able to put some checks in pockets for people who really needed it. Think about the child tax credit. That changed lives for families and put shots in arms. And so that is why we have an economy that is growing. That is why we have an economy that is leading the world. And those are just the facts.
You said for September 11th that the president and the vice president will be in New York.
Yeah.
Did you say if they'll be at Ground Zero, Memorial?
They will be at Ground Zero. I will have more details to share.
Okay. They'll be at Ground Zero for the memorial?
Yes.
Okay. On guns as well, does the president feel that he's exhausted executive actions at this point on gun control?
Look, Zolan, you know this. You've covered this. The president has taken more than 24 executive actions. 24 executive actions on trying to do everything that he can to prevent gun violence. That is a lot. Look, he will always find ways to see what else he can do, to see what else his administration, the actions his administration can take. We have the Office of the Gun Violence Prevention, and what that does, one of the things that does is those executive actions and also that legislation that was passed and that he signed to make sure that we move quickly with those actions and particular components of that act, and so that we put that out there into communities and make sure that we're doing everything we can to continue to keep or to try to keep communities safe. But the answer is legislation. We have to have laws, more laws, additional laws, so that we can protect communities.
But as far as the White House, I mean, do you feel that is the White House fully in implementation phase with the actions already taken, or are there any executive actions that could?
As I said in my answer just seconds ago, we are going to do everything that we can, his agencies out there, including with the president, to see what else can be done. But more than 24 executive actions is nothing to sleep on, right? That is something that he moved forward on because Congress wasn't moving fast enough. Right? We were able to get that bipartisan act done, but we needed to do more. And so, look, we'll always find ways to move, to see what else can be done, but we have to get Congress to do the work. We know congressional Democrats are ready to do the work. We need congressional Republicans to join those Democrats. Look, but signing the law, the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, was not a small feat.
Well,
that was a big thing to
in
get
terms
done.
of congressional help, has
Yes.
does he have any meetings scheduled at the White House, or does he have any meetings scheduled with members of Congress to actually talk about a way forward?
So I don't have any meetings to read out to you that relates to this particular issue. I say this all the time. We have the Office of Leg Affairs. They talk to congressional members pretty regularly on an array of issues that's important to the president, to the American people. Certainly that will continue. But it doesn't stop us continuing to say how sad this day is, to really be clear that this should not be happening, and enough is enough, and we need to continue to do the work, and that really is on the other side of Pennsylvania. Congress has to continue to do the work to stop this, and that it means we need laws. We need laws. Okay, Jeff.
Thank you. Kirby mentioned that regarding U.S. Steel, that the president's position on that, and that it was appropriate to have a CFIUS review. Can you give us an update on where the CFIUS review stands and when you expect to hear from them?
So I don't have any news to make today on anything like that. The CFIUS review, as you know, is incredibly independent. The CFIUS hasn't transmitted a recommendation yet to the president, and that's the next step in this process. But I don't have anything else to add beyond that. Look, you heard from the president and the vice president on Labor Day. They were very clear. They are committed to ensuring steel is made in America. That's what the president said, and making sure that unionized workers and U.S. Steel should remain an American company. That's what he wants to see. As far as the CFIUS review, they're going through their process. They'll make a recommendation. We just don't have anything to share on it today.
Okay. Thank you, Corinne. The president's son, Hunter, is set to begin a trial for tax issues later this week. I was wondering if the president plans to attend any part of the trial?
So what I'll say from the top, and you have heard me say this many times, is that Hunter is a private citizen, as you all know. So when it comes to his own legal circumstances, I would certainly refer you to him on his personal representatives. I would say as well that, of course, the president and the first lady, they love their son. They're proud of his resilience and his strength, and they support him as he continues to move forward in his life. I don't have anything else to add beyond that, and I will just leave it there for now.
Has the president advised Hunter in any way on how to approach?
He's a private citizen. He has his own legal representation, and I won't share beyond that. I won't give it beyond that.
The president's statement about the shooting talks about how it's personal to him. You've mentioned that a few times. Can you just speak at all to how he reacted to the news when he heard today?
It's
that we are back here again.
We are back here again. You're right. It's devastating. It's devastating. It is. You heard me say this, and I think it's in the president's statement as well. It is in the president's statement in that first paragraph where he talks about this is basically a school year, a new school year. This is supposed to be an opportunity for kids to celebrate, see their friends, be joyous, as the president says, and yet we see another horrific shooting. And it's heartbreaking. I mean, when the president says it's personal to him, you hear something like that. These are children. Children.
Let's follow up then on Dylan's questions. you laid out everything you want Congress to do. If it is so devastating to this president, what is he doing to help Americans feel better about sending their kids to school tomorrow?
So, if you look at the president's actions and what he has done since almost day one of this administration, if you think about the 24 actions that he's taken, executive actions that he's taken, that is showing Americans that this is an issue where whether it is sending your kids to school, whether it's your community that he cares about and wants communities and schools to be safe. We should be safe in our communities. And then he worked and reached across the aisle when people said he could not get it done, because it's been decades since we were able to get something like the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act done. And he reached across the aisle to get that done. I think that shows to the American people that he took this very seriously. And lastly, he started the Office to Prevent Gun Violence that the Vice President leads. And what that does, and this is really going to get to the heart of your question, is that one of the things that they do is they reach out to communities, especially in a moment like this, and figure out what can we do to help a community heal and move forward. And just think about it. The fact that we had to set up an office like that is just devastating to think about. But we had to. And the president wanted to continue to show to Americans how serious he was. And that's why we have an office to move forward, obviously, with the executive actions, to move forward with the law, to make sure they're rapidly being executed, but also to help families and communities. And look, there's no easy answer here, because it's devastating. It is devastating. I'm a mom, you're a mom, many of your colleagues are parents. And to see this on the week that you're sending your kids to school is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I mean, I think about it all the time. What would happen? And then you hear your kids are going through lockdowns. That's awful. But I think what the American people could be assured of, and all they have to do is look at the president's action, is that he's going to do everything that he can. But we really do need Republicans in Congress to act. We do. We do need them to act. Democrats are ready. They need to join us. Go ahead, Ed.
Thanks, Erin. I'm going to ask you about the economy. So the JOLTS report came out that shows that 7.7 million jobs are open in this country, but the revisions in that number showed that the layoffs have been revised up. Last month, 62,000, 1.6 million. We have a jobs report coming out on Friday. Has the jobs growth significantly stalled in this country?
So a couple of things that I do want to touch on, look, because of the strong recovery and the work that this president and this vice president has been able to do over
no interest loans to small businesses that want to expand, and we will, and this is very important, cut the red tape that can make starting and growing a small business more difficult than it needs to be. More difficult than it needs to be. For example, we will make it cheaper and easier for small businesses to file their taxes. Similar to how individuals can take a standard deduction. You know, I said to my team, kind of like, now I'm going to date myself again because they no longer do it, but kind of like, you remember the 1040 EZ? Like that kind of idea, right? Like, let's just take away some of the bureaucracy in the process to make it easier for people to actually do something that's going to benefit our entire economy. Third, my plan will invest in small businesses and innovators throughout America, and here's why. We know that talent exists everywhere in our country, from rural towns to city centers. But not everyone has access to the financing, to venture capital, or expert advice. It's not that they don't have the skills, it's not that they don't have the work ethic. It's access to these resources. So under my plan, we will expand access to venture capital. We will support innovation hubs and business incubators. And we will increase federal contracts with small businesses. And we will have a particular focus on small businesses in rural communities, like right here in New Hampshire. Finally, my plan will make our tax code more fair while also prioritizing investment and innovation. So let us be clear. Billionaires and big corporations must pay their fair share in taxes. Because here's the thing, it's just not right that those who can most afford it are often paying a lower tax rate than our teachers and our nurses and our firefighters. It's just not right. It's just not right. So that's why I support a billionaire minimum tax and corporations paying their fair share. And while we ensure that the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share, we will tax capital gains at a rate that rewards investment in America's innovators, founders, and small businesses. So here's the detail. If you earn $1 million a year or more, the tax rate on your long-term capital gains will be 28% under my plan, because we know when the government encourages investment, it leads to broad-based economic growth and it creates jobs, which makes our economy stronger. Now compare that to what Donald Trump plans. He intends to cut off federal programs that give loans to small businesses. He plans to give billionaires massive tax cuts and to cut corporate taxes by over $1 trillion, even as they pull in record profits. His plans will add more than $5 trillion to the national debt, and that is on top of the $2 trillion tax cut he gave them when he was president and when he exploded the deficit. We know how to count. We know how to count. And now he also wants to impose what in effect is a national sales tax on everyday products and basic necessities, which will skyrocket the cost for families and small businesses. And New Hampshire, on top of all of this, if Donald Trump were to win in November, he intends to end the Affordable Care Act, which would significantly increase costs on small businesses, as we know. And, well, you know what? The courts are going to handle that, and we will handle November. How about that? How about that? That's how we'll handle that. How about that? But think about it. It wants to end the Affordable Care Act, taking us back to a time when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. You remember what that was? Children with asthma, breast cancer survivors, grandparents with diabetes. So, yeah, look, we are here to tell him and them we are not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. No, we are not, and we will move forward because ours is a fight for the future. And it is a fight for freedom. And it is a fight for freedom. Now, I don't have to tell the folks of New Hampshire, the live free or die state, you know the importance of individual freedoms, fundamental freedoms. You know how hard people fought for these freedoms and that they are foundational to who we are and what we stand for as America. including the fundamental freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government telling her what to do. And understand how we got here. Understand how we got here. And of course, we're not going to fall for the gaslighting he's pushing, right? When he was president, Donald Trump handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as he intended, they did. And now, in more than 20 states in our nation, there is a Trump abortion ban. Many with no exceptions even for rape and incest, which is immoral. Immoral. And let us agree, and I know we do, one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government should not be telling her what to do with her body. And if he wins, you can be sure Donald Trump will go further. And he will sign a national abortion ban. And you know, Project 2025, which I mean, can you believe they put that thing in writing? And under Project 2025, he would create a national anti-abortion coordinator, which would force states, I mean, this is unbelievable, right? Which would force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. You know what they are making really quite clear? They just don't trust women. They just don't trust women. But we trust women. We trust women. And when Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. Across our nation, across our nation, and I've been traveling for many years actually, and certainly months most recently. Across our nation, I'm telling you, we are witnessing a full-on attack on hard-fought, hard-won fundamental freedoms and rights, including the freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from gun violence, the freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water, the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. And so here's what I don't have to tell the folks of New Hampshire, because you know it so well as part of your DNA. Generations of Americans before us, they fought for freedom and they led the fight for freedom in our country. And now, the baton is in our hands. The baton is in our hands. So let us understand, which we do, our purpose at this very moment. Let us remember the broad shoulders upon which we stand and the traditions of this very fight that have led to what we have been able to accomplish. And let us understand then that when we say fight, it is a fight for something, not against something. It is for something. That's what we're talking about when we talk about a new way forward. This is for something. And so, as an example, let us finally pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Let us finally pass an assault weapons ban and universal background checks and red flag laws. because we are clear on that point, it is a false choice to say you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, and I know we need reasonable gun safety laws in our country. And there's another point that I'd like to stress about this election in 24. This is not 2016 or 2020. The stakes are even higher this time for a number of reasons, but I'm going to mention one in particular. What the Supreme Court recently did when they basically just told the former president that going forward he will effectively be immune no matter what he does in the White House. But let's take this seriously and understand what it means. Before, at least, there might have been the threat that there would be consequence and accountability. With that ruling, what this means is that almost explicitly he has been told no consequence. And imagine, just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails. Just imagine with no guardrails. He has openly vowed to be a dictator on day one. He has said he would end the independence of the Department of Justice, the United States Department of Justice, so he could have the unchecked power to seek vengeance against people who disagree with him. He even called for, I'm going to quote now, the termination of the Constitution of the United States of America. Let us be very clear. Someone who suggests we should terminate the Constitution of the United States of America should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. Never again. So I'll end where I started. When it comes down to it, we are all here together because we love our country. We love our country. And we know the privilege and pride that comes with being an American. And I do believe it is one of the highest forms of patriotism to fight for the ideals of our country. That is how we realize the promise of America. And so with that being said, I ask New Hampshire, are you ready to have your voices heard? Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. God bless you.
supporting this, seeing you putting a laptop on it?